Slip into that symbiote. The movie based on Spidey villain Venom is set to launch an R-rated extended universe. I'm Sasha Perl-Raver, and this is Screen Junkies News. Spider-Man: Homecoming hits theaters in July and marks an unprecedented cooperation between two major studios, Marvel and Sony. However, Sony currently has the film rights to all of the Spider-Man universe just sitting there, waiting to be used. Last week, Sony announced plans to give one of Spider-Man's most notorious villains turned heroes, Venom, his very own film. And today, Collider reported that Sony will be using the film to debut their own R-rated extended universe. Here to talk with me about this is Victor Torres.
How's it going?
Hey, man. So before we even talk about Venom, let's kind of get into the rogues gallery that they can use in this R-rated universe. Like, who else do we have?
Basically any kind of Spider-Man villain or character. That's basically what Sony has right now. So you have Electro, you have Mysterio, you have Doc Ock, you have the Goblins. In 2007, after Spider-Man 3, Sam Raimi started working on Spider-Man 4, and after kind of production, and I think like the writing process wasn't going where he wanted it, he basically just was like, you know what, I don't want this to be a Spider-Man 3. So Sony was like, great, we'll just reboot it. 2012, we get The Amazing Spider-Man. As a result, also what was released in 2012 was The Avengers. So then Sony's like, ooh, they're onto something there. 2014, we see The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and there's a little nod at the end in Oscorp where you see like the Doc Ock like arms, the octopus arms, I think like the rhinos in it.
Yeah.
And so essentially what they were looking to do afterwards was to build a villain Avengers kind of movie that would have been sent around the rogues gallery with Spider-Man's villains. So it's a little hairy just because it's kind of at this moment, as far as I know, Sony kind of just owns the rights to Spider-Man's characters.
Right.
So it's a little limited, but that's kind of how we got to this point.
But I think that's sort of interesting. In terms of it being R-rated, do you think that this is just a reaction to like the success of Deadpool and Logan, and they're like, nah, just make it R and people will pay money?
I think from what I've heard, because there was always buzz about there being like a Sinister Six movie or a focus on villains, and that was never, no one ever came forward and said like, you know what, we're done with this idea of going with like a villain-driven film. So I don't think it's completely reactionary, but I also do think it being R-rated, absolutely. I mean, when you see the kind of numbers that Deadpool pulls in, when you see the numbers that Logan pulls in, and they're two completely different movies.
And also critically, they do so well critically and at the box office. They're like, oh, this can be prestige. And so where do you think this lands in terms of having a film or having a universe which actually doesn't have Spider-Man? Because this is going to be a whole other thing. Does it actually open up more opportunities for them to go in a different way tonally, or to do more interesting characters?
It's tough. I mean, I'm sure it's possible they have some interesting villains. I think what they would need to do is make these first ones at least character pieces. We'd have to find a way. I mean, if we're going to do Venom, for example, find a way to identify with Venom. If they do like Eddie Brock's mother died in childbirth. His father resents him. He's gone through a lot of crapped and has been crapped on to get to the point where he becomes a villain. I think that would be kind of an angle, finding a way for the audience to identify. I think also it's really tough because since they only have Spider-Man characters and they would be going in like an R-rated territory, it's not like they could work with Marvel about being like, Marvel's like, hey, you know what, you can have Loki for an R-rated movie.
Yeah.
Disney's not going to do an R-rated film. So if they want to do that, it's going to be specifically Spider-Man properties at this moment.
Well, there is a casting breakdown on My Entertainment World, and it classifies the movie as action/horror/sci-fi. Do you think that fits? Does that make you more excited?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love
absolutely,
it. Like,
because I think action and sci-fi kind of comes with the territory of anything Marvel. But I think kind of that aspect of horror, it's going into like a darker realm. We might be able to see something that maybe Deadpool and Logan didn't give us, an aspect of horror in a superhero franchise.
Who, me? I give you everything you wanted.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, I feel I give you all your dreams.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's cool. I think the only thing I can think of horror would be like Blade. Like, the only thing else I can think that would come close.
I do enjoy me some Blade movies, truly. Okay. So they move forward in this direction. The more you talk about it, by the way, the more excited I'm getting about it.
The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm also getting excited. Like, just listening to me, I'm like the Sony hype man for this.
It's working.
Like, yeah.
Well, because we know we're going to just keep getting more and more comic book movies. So now that we're going into a darker realm, a more R-rated realm, I love that. And also, it's not characters where we have to like watch the exact same origin story over and over and over when we already know it. So now that I'm already excited, who would you put as the director and the actor? Because as you were talking about it, suddenly I had these visions of like James Wan. I think it was the like horror part of it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay, who would you do?
Okay,
give me an actor, give me a director.
I actually was kind of freaking out because I was trying to figure out who I thought would be able to encompass this kind of superhero spectacle, but also be able to drive a character piece, be able to get people into who is Venom. I think it'd be kind of really easy with this villains universe to kind of just make them two-dimensional. They're bad guys. It's, you know. But I think what would be really great for is Denis Villeneuve.
Oh God, I love him so much.
I think Arrival alone, you have this great spectacle, but it's also this great emotional piece where these characters, and without giving away any spoilers, I also think he kind of encompasses that weird kind of darkness while also like suspense. Sicario, the Juarez scene.
Totally.
Like you feel like you're gonna have a heart attack watching that. I think he would be a perfect choice to direct a Venom movie.
Absolutely. An Enemy really is very much like that had a lot of sci-fi in it, and
there's a spider in it,
and there's that crate, which honestly I feel like influenced the aliens that we see in Arrival.
Totally.
Like if you look at them, they kind of look the same. I love Denis Villeneuve. Okay,
the spiders were just the aliens from Arrival.
Right?
It was a prequel.
So I'm fully sold on Denny. God, I'm saying it. I'm getting the chills. Does that mean we're getting a Jake Gyllenhaal Venom? Or who's in this?
I think Michael B. Jordan would be a perfect, because I was really trying to think of the character Eddie, and this is just specifically if they were going with Eddie Brock.
Sure.
But Eddie Brock has been like crapped on. Like he was tracking a serial killer who ended up like being caught by Spider-Man. He's resentful. He's contemplating suicide. He goes to a church to ask for forgiveness, you know, before getting attached with the symbiote. I think that kind of depth in character, I think that the drive that he would take, because before that he was resentful towards Spider-Man. He was tracking down Sin Eater, was a serial killer, and it turns out there was this guy who was this kind of like just kind of fake confessing like the murders, and Spider-Man caught the real Sin Eater, and as a result, like Eddie Brock's like, well, screw that. I'm gonna like start like lifting weights and get like really buff. And he kind of comes to this point where it's like nothing is going his way. He kind of falls into becoming a villain. And I think Michael B. Jordan would be the perfect, I think like Creed is a perfect example of a character who has experienced pain, who has to work his way to basically get to that fight. And I think he'd be great.
I love it. I love it. Okay, well, after this, which at this point now is going to be like one of my favorite movies just based on what you're creating in your mind. Thank you so much, Victor. Where would you like to see them go? Like, what's the next Spider-Man villain that they bring to the big screen?
This is a little on the nose, but I think, like I've said like a billion times, like I think like really making these characters somewhat identifiable would be a smart move. So I think like Carnage would be really cool. Specifically delving into like this American Psycho, like Marvel American Psycho kind of movie. Carnage has this kind of philosophy that laws are only words, and that the really only way to achieve true freedom is like through bloodshed. And I think it'd be really kind of cool, kind of like with Nolan did with The Dark Knight, getting into the philosophy of a character like the Joker, like Carnage, what makes him tick that way, and how can we see ourselves within that character that would drive 90 minutes, you know, or 100 minutes of a movie, instead of it being like, he's a crazy bad guy, he likes killing people. But yeah, I would love to see a Carnage movie.
Awesome. Well, Victor, this has been so illuminating, and I really appreciate your take on this. I hope somebody at Sony was listening, because those were a bunch of really good ideas, but we want to know your ideas too. Who do you think should helm a Venom movie, and who do you think should star in it? Let us know in the comments below. You can tweet us at SJ News. Make sure to like and subscribe. Of course, you can always click here for more internets. We'll see you soon.